Civilian Conservation Corps by Karen Skuttinga. The virtues of hard work. This was a philosophy used by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt as part of his efforts to pull the United States out of the Great Depression that had taken hold of our country beginning in 1929 and persisting during the 1930s. We were plunged into the Great Depression when the excesses of the 1920s caught up to our society with extravagant debt spending by consumers and excessive risk taken on by investors. At the worst depths of the Great Depression, around 25% of our nation's workforce was unemployed. With such high unemployment and people with jobs suffering major pay cuts, many across the country suffered. Across the country, lost jobs quickly translated into lost homes and extreme poverty. In 1931, tent camps and shacks towns began to appear. Out in the Plain States, years of poor farming practices, together with severe drought, led to massive soil erosion and the Dust Bowl, leaving millions of fertile acres a wasteland. The Depression hurt everyone, but young men in particular. They had few skills and the lowest earnings and savings. They were coming of age in a time of sky-high unemployment and were at great risk for poverty and starvation. President Franklin Roosevelt saw all these problems and looked for ways to fix them. He passed, during his first 100 days in office, an unprecedented amount of legislation in efforts to address the American peril. One of his 100 days programs he passed was the Emergency Conservation Work Act, a temporary program that would become the Civilian Conservation Corps. Roosevelt described the goals of the CCC when he introduced the legislation. He said, "I propose to create a civilian conservation corps to be used in simple work, not interfering with normal employment and confining itself to forestry, the prevention of soil erosion, flood control, and similar projects. I call your attention to the fact that this type of work is of definite practical value, not only through the prevention of great present financial loss, but also a means of creating future national wealth. More important, however, than the material gains will be the moral and spiritual value of such work. The overwhelming majority of unemployed Americans who are now walking the streets and receiving private or public relief would infinitely prefer to work. We can take a vast army of these unemployed out into healthful surroundings." The Civilian Conservation Corps legacy sums this up by saying, its purpose is twofold: conservation of our natural resources and the salvage of our young men. The program, which started out with 250,000 men, would eventually employ 3 million young men, Native Americans, World War I veterans throughout its 9-year history. The CCC would go on to leave a legacy of restored natural beauty, economic sustenance for families across the country, and a generation of men made better for their experience. The Great Depression that would first shatter America would then prove to rebuild our economy, leaving it with roads, bridges, dams, power, and parks. If you've ever been camping, you've probably hiked on a trail or used a lodge that was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. This map shows the location of the projects undertaken by the CCC groups across the United States. Several federal agencies would be involved in the running of the program, but the biggest influence was the Army. The Army was most capable of moving hundreds of thousands of young men into sites across all 48 states and several territories, setting up and supplying camps and getting the work done. Most of the men in the program came from the urban areas of the East and were moved out west. Few had the experience of being in the wilderness, and many hadn't ventured out so far from their homes. They signed up for 6-month enlistments, which could be extended for up to 2 years. The camps, while not officially military, were run much in the same way as a base or a boot camp. The young men were woken up early in the day to the reveille. Roll was called, calisthenic drills were run, bunks were made and kept in order, and men were given their tasks for the day. The men who signed up for the CCC were generally 17 to 25 years old, unemployed, unmarried, and not in school. Exceptions were made for World War I veterans in need of work, but the bulk were young men. The pay for the work was low, at $1 a day. They earned $30 a month, but $25 of that was withheld and sent to support their families back home. That left them with $5 a month to spend on themselves in towns near their camps. Beyond material objects, men also gained a sense of pride, camaraderie, and independence as a result of their time in the CCC. Participants became healthier with regular meals. They also gained confidence, work skills, and travel experience. The money sent back home boosted the economy. The mayor of Chicago credited the program with a drop in the crime rate. Belden Lewis recorded his experience of life in the CCC in a diary from 1934 to 1935. The diary reveals the daily work routine, as well as offering glimpses into the exciting happenings as a CCC boy. When describing a day of work, he says, "I'm tired out, legs ache, been working hard, spread pea gravel on walks, went to Rockville for gravel, worked hard." More prominent in the diary are writings about events outside of work. Receiving a letter from home or eating a well-prepared and well-portioned dinner were generally the highlights of his day. Just like visitors today, CCC men explored much of the park and the surrounding areas. The CCC men spent all week completing back-breaking labor, but still managed to complete great physical exertion on the weekends. Lewis writes, I went on a long hike, first to West Rim, then on the way back Whittison, and I went to Angel's Landing and signed our names in the autograph book. The hike was at least 25 miles long round trip, and we were tired. The CCC boys worked hard, but also had opportunities to enjoy and appreciate the beautiful park they were creating. In addition to the financial and health benefits, the CCC offered educational benefits for the workers. Strong emphasis was put on ensuring all CCC workers would leave literate. More than 40,000 men learned to read during their time with the CCC. Other work skills like carpentry, stone cutting, welding, truck driving, and typing were taught to fill in the need for skilled craftsmen. The greatest benefit to the young men was a sense of purpose the work gave them. No longer bumming around or hitting the rails in search of menial jobs, the men were learning the satisfactions of hard work and gaining valuable experience. The CCC performed 300 types of work projects falling into as many as 10 categories, including structural improvements, erosion control, forest protection, wildlife conservation, and stream improvement. The CCC dissolved in 1942. As the economy began to improve in the late 1930s, young men found higher paying jobs at home, and the number of CCC camps across the country dwindled. President Roosevelt attempted to turn this into a permanent agency, but that effort failed. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor and subsequent U.S. involvement in World War II, the CCC's funding and assets were diverted as the nation's focus shifted toward the war effort. There were many notable alumni of the Civilian Conservation Corps. They include Chuck Yeager, West Virginia CCC, joined the Army Air Corps during the war, rose to become Brigadier General, and was the first man to break the sound barrier. Robert Mitchum became an actor, known in film classics such as Cape Fear, Winds of War, Night of the Hunter. And here pictured is Norman Borlaug, a CCC member who went on to lead the Green Revolution in agriculture, helping to keep billions of people from starvation. For his efforts, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. And my own grandfather, Renaud McAllister, who would later fight during World War II as a paratrooper and continue in the Army until retirement, becoming a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. Some of us do not have to look far to see the impact this program made on our own personal lives. Today, legacy of the CCC continues to live on in hundreds of campgrounds, hiking trails, and swimming holes still enjoyed by Americans today. When you visit such places as the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, parks that resulted from the works of the Tennessee Valley Authority such as Big Ridge State Park, and the Grand Canyon National Park, which improvements include the hiking trails. Next time you walk across a bridge made by the CCC, I hope you'll take a moment to remember the hardworking young men who created a lasting legacy for future generations to enjoy.